The day my son told me to leave my own house, the sun was shining. I remember that because it felt cruel, like the world had decided to smile while my heart was being torn apart. He stood in the kitchen doorway, tall and restless, his eyes darting anywhere but toward me. His wife, Mara, hovered behind him, her arms folded, a shadow of victory playing on her lips. I had just finished washing the dishes. The water was still warm on my hands when he said it. "Ma, we think it's time you move out." We, not I. That word cut deeper than anything else. I turned, drying my hands on a towel, trying to read his face. "Move out? What do you mean, Daniel? This is my house." He shifted uncomfortably. "Technically, it's mine now, Ma. You signed it over when we refinanced the mortgage, remember?" Yes, I remembered. He'd said it was temporary, just to help him qualify for a better loan when he and Mara were struggling to buy their shop. I trusted him. I always had. After his father died, I told myself Daniel was all I had left, and that family doesn't betray family. I looked at him then, my only son, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who would run to me after scraping his knee, crying into my apron, promising he'd never leave me. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man I barely recognized. "Why?" I asked softly. Mara spoke before he could. "It's just uncomfortable having you here, Mrs. Harris. You're always in the kitchen or cleaning or commenting." "Commenting?" I repeated. She crossed her arms tighter. "You make me feel judged." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. "I raised your husband in this house, cooked every meal, paid every bill, and now I'm making you uncomfortable." Her eyes didn't waver. "It's time for us to have our own space. You'll be fine, right? There's that small apartment across town. Daniel said he'd help you with the rent for a few months." I turned to my son again. "Is that true?" He swallowed hard. "It's for the best, Ma. We all need our independence." Independence. That word used to mean freedom. Now it sounded like exile. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded, as if my body knew what my heart couldn't yet process. That evening I packed my things. A few clothes, some family photos, my old Bible, and a small box of letters from Daniel's father. The house was silent except for the sound of my suitcase wheels on the wooden floor. I could hear them whispering in the living room. Mara telling him not to feel guilty, Daniel saying it was harder than she thought. I didn't say goodbye. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The air was sharp and smelled of spring. Across the street, a couple walked their dog, laughing. It was the same street where Daniel learned to ride his bike, where I'd once stood clapping for him as he pedaled down the sidewalk, shouting, "You can do it, baby!" Now I could barely stand. The apartment I found was small, but it was quiet. A single room, a stove that barely worked, and a window that faced the alley. I told myself it was temporary, that Daniel would come around once he realized how wrong it was. But weeks turned into months, and the only thing I received from him was silence. Sometimes I'd see pictures online, Mara posting their dinners, their vacations, their perfect smiles. They looked happy, happier without me. I survived on my pension, cooked simple meals, and spent my evenings listening to the radio. The loneliness came in waves. It wasn't just the absence of people. It was the absence of being needed. I used to have purpose. Now I was just passing time. Then one night, almost 2 years later, there was a knock on my door. It was past midnight. I hesitated, thinking it might be a mistake, but then I heard it again, louder. desperate. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize him. Daniel stood there, drenched from the rain, his eyes hollow, his hands shaking. He looked like the life had been drained out of him. "Ma?" he whispered. "Can I come in?" For a moment I didn't move. I just stared at him. My son, the man who'd thrown me out of my home, standing before me like a lost child. I stepped aside. "Of course." He came in, dripping water onto the floor, his clothes clinging to him. I handed him a towel, and he sat down at my small table, the same one I ate at alone every night. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He buried his face in his hands. "The business. It's gone." I felt a dull ache in my chest. "Gone? What do you mean?" "Mara's boutique. The loan, the rent, everything. It collapsed. We're bankrupt. They took the shop, the car, even the house. My house." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain hit the window in steady bursts, filling the silence that hung between us. He finally looked up, eyes red. "I didn't know where else to go, Ma. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I was stupid. Mara pushed and He stopped. "I just thought I was doing what was right for my family." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to remind him of the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the humiliation of losing everything I'd built. But instead I felt something else. Pity. Because in that moment I realized he was lost. The world he'd chosen over me had finally turned its back on him. "Where's Mara now?" I asked. He hesitated. "She left. Said she couldn't live like this. Went to her sister's place." I nodded slowly. "I see." He looked around the tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the worn-out furniture. "You live here?" he asked softly. "Yes." He lowered his head. "I'm so sorry, Ma." I poured him a cup of tea, the last of what I had. He held it in both hands like a child afraid of breaking it. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally. "I just need a place to stay for a while, just until I figure things out." I watched him. His face was thinner now, older, weighed down by regret. "Of course, Daniel," I said quietly. "You can stay." He broke down then, right there at my table, crying like he hadn't since he was 10 years old. I stood behind him, placing my hand on his shoulder. Not because I'd forgotten what he'd done, but because I couldn't stop being his mother. When he finally fell asleep on the couch, I sat by the window watching the rain fade into dawn. The city outside was waking up. Cars, buses, people rushing to work. And for the first time in years, my home didn't feel empty anymore. But deep down, I knew something. This wasn't redemption. This was life's cruel symmetry. The same circle of need and neglect coming back around. Because I'd lost everything when I trusted my son. And now he was back. Not to love me, but because he had nowhere else to go. Still, I let him stay, because that's what mothers do. Daniel stayed. At first it was strange but manageable. He kept mostly to himself, quiet and polite, like a guest trying not to overstay his welcome. I cooked for two again, something I hadn't done in years. I even found myself setting the table for him every evening. Old habits dying hard. But soon, the pattern changed. He began waking late, leaving dirty dishes in the sink, sighing heavily whenever I asked about his plans. The fire of repentance that had burned so bright when he first arrived was fading. What remained was the same entitled tone I remembered from the last years before he'd thrown me out. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I'd learned long ago that silence could hold more weight than words. Still, it hurt to see him like that. Once he'd been full of dreams. Bright, ambitious, stubborn. Now, he was a shell of that man, nursing bitterness like it was all he had left. One evening, as I sat mending an old blanket, he came to the table with a folder. His eyes were tired but lit with a spark I hadn't seen in months. "I have an idea," he said. "A new business. Smaller this time, but I can make it work." I set my sewing aside. "Daniel, you don't even have money for groceries." He smiled weakly. "That's why I came to you." It was like déjà vu. The tone, the pleading eyes. The same way he'd convinced me to sign my house over to him years ago. I stared at him for a long time, then shook my head. "No, Daniel, I can't." "Ma, listen." "I have listened," I interrupted. "I listened when you told me it was temporary, when you said you'd take care of me. I lost everything, because I believed you." He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, lowering his gaze. "It's different this time," he said quietly. "I've learned." "Maybe," I said. "But I haven't forgotten." He stood abruptly, frustration flashing across his face. "You don't trust me?" "Would you?" That silenced him. He stormed out, slamming the door. I sat there, the blanket half sewn, my heart aching. Not because I'd refused him, but because I knew. No matter what he'd done, part of me still wanted to help. Days passed. He came home later and later, sometimes smelling of cheap whiskey. He said he was meeting investors, but I knew that tone. I'd heard it from his father once. The voice of a man chasing hope through the bottom of a glass. Then, one afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to find the apartment door unlocked. Inside, drawers were open, my small jewelry box gone. My late husband's watch, the only thing of value I still had, was missing. My heart sank. Daniel was gone too. I waited all night, pacing. Around 2 a.m., he came stumbling through the door, eyes red, face pale. "Where is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Daniel," I said again, louder this time. "Where is the watch?" He ran his hands through his hair. "Ma, I needed cash. I'll get it back, I swear." I stepped closer, anger burning through my chest. "That was your father's. The only thing left of him. I didn't have a choice," he shouted. "You don't understand. I'm drowning here." "No, Daniel," I whispered. "You're stealing from the only person who still loves you." He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "I'll fix it," he murmured. "I promise." But he didn't. The next morning he was gone again. And so was my television, the small one my neighbor had given me last Christmas. I should have gone to the police. But I didn't. How could I? Reporting him would mean admitting I'd failed. As a mother, as a protector, as everything I was supposed to be. Instead, I waited. A week later he came back, gaunt, shaking, eyes hollow. "Ma," he said, barely above a whisper. "I need help." I looked at him. Really looked. His hands trembled. His clothes hung loose. He wasn't drunk this time. He was desperate. "I'm being followed," he said. "I owe money. They said they'll—" He stopped, voice cracking. "They'll hurt me." My knees weakened. "Daniel, what did you do?" He fell to the floor, crying. "I don't know. I tried to fix things, Ma. I thought I could make it right." I helped him up the same way I had when he was little, when he'd scrape his knee or break a toy. But this time, I knew I couldn't fix it. For the next few days, he hid in my apartment. I barely slept. Every time someone knocked, he'd flinch. Every sound made him jump. Then one night it happened. A loud banging on the door. Voices outside. Rough, angry, slurred with rage. "Daniel Harris. We know you're in there." He froze. I could see the panic in his eyes. I whispered, "Go out the back." He shook his head. "They'll find me." The banging grew louder. "Open the damn door." Without thinking, I opened it. 2 men stood there. One tall, one heavy-set. Their faces were cold, cruel. "Where is he?" the tall one demanded. "He's not here," I said firmly. The heavy-set man smirked. "Wrong answer, lady." They pushed past me, scanning the room. Daniel tried to hide behind the curtain, but it was useless. They grabbed him, dragging him toward the door as he screamed. "Stop!" I shouted. "Please, he's my son." One of them turned, eyes sharp. "Then tell him to pay what he owes." And then they were gone. I stood in the doorway long after the sound of their car faded. My heart felt like it had cracked open. He didn't come back that night, or the next. I went to the police, told them everything. They said they'd look into it, but I could tell by their eyes they wouldn't. He was just another man who'd made bad choices. I prayed for him every night, whispering his name into the dark. A week later, there was a knock on my door again. This time it was a stranger, a nurse holding a clipboard. "Are you Mrs. Harris?" she asked, my stomach twisted. "Yes. Your son is at St. Mary's Hospital. He was found in an abandoned lot. He's asking for you." I didn't even grab my coat. When I saw him, my knees nearly gave out. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. His lips split. Tubes ran from his arms. He looked so small, so fragile. Nothing like the man who once stood so tall in my kitchen telling me to leave my home. "Ma," he whispered. I sat beside him, taking his hand. "I'm here." "I messed up," he said, tears pooling in his good eye. "I'm sorry." "I know," I whispered. "Rest now." But he shook his head weakly. "I don't deserve it." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a moment I saw the boy again. The one who built forts in the living room and told me he'd buy me a big house one day. "I just wanted to make you proud," he said. I brushed his hair back. "You always were, Daniel, even when you forgot how to be." He smiled faintly, eyes fluttering shut. The machines beeped steadily. I sat there until morning, watching him breathe, my heart breaking quietly in the sterile white light. He survived, but something inside him didn't. When they discharged him a week later, he came home. Back to my small apartment. This time, he didn't ask for money or forgiveness. He just asked if he could stay. And of course, I said yes, because I couldn't stop being his mother, no matter how many times he broke my heart. The weeks after Daniel came home from the hospital passed quietly. He moved slower now, limping from the bruises that never fully faded. He hardly spoke. He'd sit by the window for hours, watching the street like he was afraid of it. At first I thought the silence meant healing, but I learned it was shame, the kind that seeps into a person's bones until it becomes their shadow. I cooked soup every night and left it on the table for him. Sometimes he ate, sometimes he didn't. When he slept, he muttered things. Numbers, names, half-formed apologies. Once I heard him whisper, "Dad, I tried." I didn't tell him that his father would have forgiven him too. Some truths are too heavy to lift out loud. One evening he came to me, eyes rimmed red. "Ma," he said, "I found work, just warehouse shifts. It's nothing big, but it's something." I smiled. "That's good, Daniel." He looked away. They pay weekly. I'll help with rent. I wanted to say I didn't need it, but I let him. Sometimes letting a man feel useful is its own kind of mercy. For a little while, life steadied. He went to work, came home tired but calm. He even started fixing things around the apartment. Tightened a loose hinge. Patched the leak under the sink. Little things. But they made the place feel alive again. Then one morning I woke to find a letter on the table, my name on the front, written in his crooked handwriting. Inside a short note. Ma, don't worry. I'm gonna make things right. I'll be back soon. Love, Daniel. My stomach turned. I knew that tone. Reckless hope dressed as purpose. He didn't come home that night, or the next. I went to the warehouse. They said he hadn't shown up for work. The police couldn't do much. He was an adult, they said. Adults disappear all the time. Days blurred together. I kept the lamp by the window burning, just in case he saw it from the street. I prayed until my voice cracked. A week later, a knock came at dawn. 2 officers stood there, hats in their hands. They found him near the river. He'd tried to settle a debt he couldn't repay. He was gone before anyone could help him. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I just sat on the couch, hands folded in my lap, staring at the chipped paint on the wall. They let me see him one last time. His face was peaceful, almost childlike. I brushed his hair back just as I had the day he was born. My tears fell onto his skin, but he didn't move. The funeral was small. A few neighbors came out of pity or kindness. Mara didn't. I heard she'd moved out of state, remarried. After everyone left, I stayed by the grave until the sun dipped low. The wind rustled through the dry grass, whispering like an old friend. I forgive you, I said quietly. For everything. It wasn't for him anymore. It was for me. The following weeks were hollow. I went through his things. A few shirts, a wallet with $3, and a photo of me holding him as a baby. The edges were worn, the middle smudged from fingerprints. He'd kept it all this time. Sometimes at night I still hear him in the apartment. His heavy steps, the door creaking, the clatter of a cup he never washed. I leave the lamp on for him anyway. People say grief fades. They're wrong. It doesn't fade. It settles. It becomes part of the air you breathe. The sound of the clock. The weight of your own heartbeat. Every morning I pass by the old house. The one that used to be mine. The windows are different now. The paint brighter. A new family lives there. A little boy plays in the yard where Daniel once rode his bike. His laughter echoes down the street, sharp and pure. Sometimes he waves at me. I wave back, pretending not to feel the ache that comes with it. I don't hate what life became. Hate takes too much energy. What I feel is quieter. A dull, constant missing. A space that never fills. I keep a small jar of wildflowers on the windowsill. Daniel used to pick them for me when he was little. Clumsy hands full of weeds he thought were roses. Now, I pick them for him. When the nights get long, I talk to him. About the weather, about the neighbor's cat, about the soup I made. It's silly, maybe, but it keeps me from forgetting the sound of my own voice. I think of all the ways love can destroy and save a person at the same time. How we give everything to those we raise, and sometimes they still fall. And yet, if I could go back, if I could hold that baby one more time, hear that tiny cry again, I know I'd still choose him, even knowing how it ends. Because that's what mothers do. We love until there's nothing left.